Hey everybody, it's Rod with the Photo Fair coming back at you with another video. Today, I want to talk about this Canon 5D Mark II I picked up at the Portland Photo Fair. Is this camera still usable today? Let's find out. So yeah, I got this camera for under $200 and it's in really cherry shape. Now I see these for sale closer to $350 body only, but this guy had bought a whole Canon system and had like 6 of them, and he needed to get rid of a few of them. And so I was the lucky guy to get over to his table and grab one of these. He sold all of his 5D Mark IIs that he had on the table. This camera came out in 2008. Is it even still usable? And this kind of applies, I think, for Nikon's D700, which also came out in 2008 and was a direct competitor to the 5D series of cameras. These, both the Nikon D700 and the Canon 5D Mark II, were aimed at professionals and very serious amateurs. Neither of them was a flagship camera, but both of them were widely used by working professionals. And remember, this was before Sony launched the A7, with the full frame mirrorless. So, SLRs were king at this point in time. And the Nikon D700 and the Canon 5D Mark II, those were the top of that kind of mainstream pro body. So what I talk about today is going to be focused on the 5D Mark II, but it really applies to the Nikon as well. The only real difference, there were feature differences and people, had their opinion which they preferred, both excellent cameras. The Canon 5D Mark II did offer video capability, and Nikon had not yet put that in the D700, so that was the only real advantage. By today's standards, the video capabilities of this camera, you're not going to like it for video. It just, it kind of sucks for video. It does video, and that's great, but if you have a modern camera, it's, yeah, never mind. But for stills, is it still a viable camera? I went out into the yard and decided to find out. Here's how it went. So here we are out in the backyard. You see my wife's roses over here are in bloom, and this 100 Canon macro lens is going to be mounted to this old 5D Mark II so that we can see if this thing still got anything for us. So I started with the rose here. This is the kind of shot where an older camera really excels. Obviously a static image here. The autofocus is still pretty fast on this camera, but it's not really good at locking on like modern cameras are, and it can't identify, the eye or anything like that. But for a nice static shot like this, beautiful shot, nice textures. It's just really performs well here. Okay, another nice static, easy shot for the camera. But you can see that the camera's doing a nice job of making lovely photos. Good color and contrast. The sharpness is really more the lens. That 100 f2.8L macro is razor sharp. But again, this camera on these kinds of pictures is still totally usable. Look at that. This shot really tested the camera's autofocus and motor drive speed. On shots like this, the bee was, kind of buzzing around this flower bush getting nectar. And the frame rate on the 5D Mark II is only 2.5 frames per second. They greatly improved that with the 5D Mark III. I think that one went to 4.5 or maybe even 6. I'll post it up on the screen. But I had a hard time getting sequential shots here. And the camera focused fast enough. That wasn't a problem. But as far as tracking that little guy, the tracking, it missed a lot. And that was just, I think, the technology in 2008. They were just starting to do tracking, and it just wasn't very good. But I did get, a couple of sharp ones and a few not so sharp. But this one came out pretty nice. So, for wildlife or, anything, like this where you might have fast moving subjects, the 5D Mark II is going to struggle a little bit. Now we're back to a static subject that this 5D Mark II just loves.
It's nice and sharp, and again, it's rendering the color beautifully. It's hard to tell. This, wasn't my EOS R5, which is a much newer and superior camera. Just the megapixel count, really the only difference. And, with 22 megapixels on hand, that's for a lot of shots. That's plenty. Okay, on this shot, I again kind of tested the limits of the 5D Mark II. This obviously static image here, not moving around, but I was super close. These are hummingbird blossoms. They're itty bitty little blossoms. And I was near the maximum. I wasn't quite 1-to-1 here, but pretty darn close. And so I'm moving in and out. I wasn't mounted on a tripod. So I like to motor drive these. And that way, as I'm moving, one of them is going to be nice and crisp and sharp. And of course, at 2.5 frames per second, I was a little limited. Also, I was using the servo focus, and the servo focus on the 5D Mark II definitely isn't as fast as modern cameras like my EOS R5. So I had several soft ones, but it did work and it did do a good job. And it's the 5D Mark II is still usable. It's just not, if you're coming off a modern camera with modern autofocus and high speed drive and all of that, it's hard to go backwards. But if you stick with certain type of photography, people shots, I did try to get a shot of Banjo, and I got to admit, I couldn't get that thing to lock onto his eye. I had to keep adjusting the manual focus override to do that. So that was a little frustrating. Again, the camera's not smart enough to recognize the eye or, even to recognize objects. And that's just the way it is at this price range, right? I got this camera for under $200 and you can find them for $250 pretty routinely, $300 for really cherry ones. So, it's still a very usable camera and would make a great step up from a crop sensor camera if you can't afford to buy Canon's EOS RP, which is about $1,000 for the body. And I think Nikon's got a full frame body. It's in that range as well. So, this is a great way to get into full frame.
So there you have it. The 5D Mark II. It is still a viable camera. This is a great way to get into full frame. If you're currently shooting with a crop sensor camera, especially if you're shooting with an older crop sensor camera, something like a Canon Rebel, you might be going backwards on the timeline, but you're making that step up to a very good sensor. Now, I will tell you, the 5D Mark III, I shot with the 5D Mark II. I think I bought mine in 2010. I moved off of a 7D, which was Canon's top-of-the-line crop sensor body, and I went to full frame. I was technically going backwards when I went to this camera in terms of tech, but I wanted to get the full frame. And then when the Mark III came out, I think I rode this a year or two into the Mark III before I, opened up my wallet and bought a Mark III. But the Mark III is a better camera. If you can find a Mark III for 100, 150 more than a Mark II, it's worth it. The sensors, it's not the megapixels, only 1 megapixel difference. It's the autofocus speed, the metering. They really made some solid improvements across the board on that 5D Mark III. But I don't think you're going to find a 5D Mark III for $200 or $250. And I think you can find these in that price range. It's just 16 years old technology, but it still makes great still photos. And I can highly recommend it if you can't afford to get into a modern mirrorless in full frame. So don't forget about the photo fair coming up at the Newark Pavilion on November the 16th. It's going to be a great show. We've got lots of vendors already signed up, and we are expecting a great turnout. As always, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out, gets a little more traction, and helps our videos reach more people, which means more people can learn about the amazing camera shows all over the country, but in particular, the photo fair, again, coming up. So we'll see you next time right here on YouTube or at camera shows up and down the West Coast.